Jeffrey Lurie basically admitted, like, he said, like, it's projection in terms of what he'll be as a head coach in the NFL. And he even said the words, some of the effect of like, the coach that, we hope he can be, as opposed to like the coach that he is, So like, in the same way that you draft, like a prospect in like on like day 2 or day 3, that you think has upside and is a project, it's sort of like what they did when they hired this head coach. So it can go very badly if he isn't ready for this opportunity. I do think that the enthusiasm is real and the excitement for him is real, and I do think that the players, may respond to the positivity and that energy that he brings to the table.
Appreciate you tuning in here to Birds 365 with the Mac and Mac guys. We've got an addition for the next 20 minutes or so. One of our favorites, as good a guy covering the Eagles on a day-in, day-out basis as you're going to find. Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com joins us. JK, how you doing? How's your summer going?
I'm great. How are you, Jody?
We're doing very well. I admitted this to John last week. The first time
this is an embarrassing admittance, by the way.
It is. The first time I read one of your dumpster fire columns, I read it and go, damn, he's being harsh. He does realize that they've got this, that, and the other thing. Man, this guy is looking for the underside of this team. And then your next dumpster fire came out. I go, oh, he's doing this. I get it now. Right over my head the first time I read it, I'm going, damn, this Kempski is nasty.
Yeah.
So once I got in on the joke, shouldn't have been all that hard. I said, oh, this is entertaining. But I got to admit, the first time I read it, I'm an idiot. I didn't even pick up on it. How long have you been doing dumpster fire stuff?
I'd say it's close to 10 years. I think they started in 2012. I had my own, my own blog, website, whatever you want to call it, back in the day, and that no longer exists. So the first couple years that I did them are vanished off the face of the planet. So they only exist from my Philly.com days going forward, which was 2013. So I've only been bitten once by a team that won a Super Bowl the year that I did them. Of course, that was the Eagles in 2017.
Well, it's interesting, Jimmy, because you've been doing it for a while now, but you still get those people. You still got those people who don't get it. Who don't get what you're trying to accomplish. And one of my favorite parts is you put up the hate mail after you get it done.
Right.
So you just did that. Has that decreased over the years or just a steady flow?
For sure, it's decreased over the years. Last year, I didn't even do it because I got so little hate mail from the series. But this year, it ramped up a little bit. I was really inflammatory toward the Giants. So their fan base, it spread pretty well throughout their fan base. Like a lot of people read that one, and a lot of people were mad at that one. So I got a lot of hate mail from Giants fans, and as always, I'll get a sprinkling of. Well, actually, there's usually a decent amount of hate mail from Cowboys fans, and then I think the Washington football team fans are just kind of resigned to the fact that their organization is just a dumpster fire, just generally speaking. So a little bit less from them this year and in previous years as well. But yeah, it's always fun reading that hate mail, like as it kind of trickles in, and like as it comes in, it's like, okay, I'm going to use this one, and it's a hard series to write because it's got to be on point. And if it's not, like I know it's going to be scrutinized heavily, so it's got to be good. So in that sense, they're not that fun to do, but they're fun to sort of watch the reactions after they're finally published.
Yeah, the Washington football team was a first place dumpster fire last year.
That's right.
It may be easier to write an ongoing, but at least they did win a division last year.
For sure, yeah.
Played pretty good against the Bucs in that playoff game, even though they lost. All right, this year you released Cowboys, then the next day the Giants, then the next day the Washington football team. Is it the same order every year? Do you move them around depending on which you think is the actual biggest dumpster fire? How do you determine the order that they come out?
I do the same order every year. I do the Cowboys first because they're just the most fun to do traditionally. Again, like I said, the Giants one was the most fun for me to do this year because of how much they whined about, the Eagles not taking care of business for them in the Week 17 game against the football team. So they were kind of a fun one to write this year. But yeah, it's the same order every year: Cowboys, Giants, football team, and then I'll usually kind of go around the league and take a little quick, one-hitter shots at all the other rest of the teams in the NFL, and then I do the Eagles on Friday.
All right, Jimmy, you're going to help me because, as usual with the NFC East, it's become an annual tradition now. It's one of the worst divisions in football. We're going on 3-4 years now. So I'm going to use your research here. What was the most difficult one to come up with 10 reasons to be a dumpster fire? And that's who I'm going to pick to win this division.
So it's funny you mentioned that because it's actually a pretty good exercise for that specifically. Like I remember in 2017, the Eagles weren't really like thought of as a Super Bowl contender heading into that season. But when I actually wrote that dumpster fire thing, like it was hard coming up with 10 things that year. And then as it turned out, like a lot of the things that I actually had on the list that year, they fixed between the point that I had written that and the start of the season. Like I had said something about the running backs. They traded for J.J. at the trade deadline. I, mentioned the cornerbacks, of course, wasn't the number one thing that year. Actually, they traded for Ronald Darby during training camp. So, that was a sort of a good example of what you're talking about. This year, the hardest one to write by far was Washington's. And they had some really obvious stuff up front, like the quarterback. I mean, I'm not a Ryan Fitzpatrick believer in terms of a guy who's going to lead you to a Super Bowl. They have some other issues, like their offensive tackles are, previously, of course, they had Trent Williams and they had Morgan Moses. They released Morgan Moses this offseason. Of course, Trent Williams went through everything he went through the last couple of years. Now they have a guy that they just signed for the Bears, and Charles Leno, and they have a rookie for a second-round pick that's slated to start at right tackle. So there are some question marks there. But once you get past some, and then obviously the ownership is sort of easy fodder for that team as always. But once you get past those three things, there really wasn't a lot to nitpick on that team. Like their defense is really good. Obviously, their defensive line, there's nothing to touch on that. Obviously, if you're looking for negatives, like that is arguably the best defensive line in the NFL. I think at a minimum, they're at least top 5. Their linebackers are maybe a little shaky because they're starting a rookie there, potentially their first round pick, and Jamin Davis and John Bostic is just kind of But their secondary is very good. Their corners are good. Their safeties are good. Just a really complete defense. And then their skill players on offense are really good. You have legit number one in Terry McLaurin. They signed Curtis Samuel this offseason. They bring in Adam Humphries. They have Antonio Gibson as their running back, who's sort of a versatile kind of threat in the backfield there. And again, it's really just the quarterback rather, and a couple of spots on the offensive line that were easy to pick on. But beyond that, I was really kind of stretching to get to 10 with that team.
Let me ask you about your, again, responses to get thereafter, be it called hate mail or just people who want to comment on the work that you put forth. Certainly, everybody's going to get responses from other fans out of towns if they read it when you're taking shots at their team. But then you take shots at the Eagles. That's one of the reasons why I love it, is that you're balancing the scales. At the end, you're going to go, by the way, the Philadelphia Eagles could be a dumpster fire if, and you go through all the issues they have. Do you get hate mail on that too? How dare you, Kempski? You're supposed to be one of us. You're a Philly guy. You can't point out our shortcomings. Everybody else, feel free. Have at it. Take a knife to them. But don't you dare say things about the Eagles.
How
much of that do you get?
Almost none this year. I've gotten some in the past, but almost none this year for two reasons. One, I think obviously the Eagles fans know me better than any of the other teams' fans know me, of course. So that's one reason. But then also, I think mostly everyone just kind of agreed with the points that I made about the Eagles. I think the Eagles fans, generally speaking, are pretty realistic about, how good or bad the team is. So they can recognize a bad roster and a bad team when they see it. And obviously the 2020 season, 4-11-1, and they were lucky to even win 4, in my opinion. That they're coming off that kind of season. I mean, Eagles fans are kind of just down and out right now, and for good reason. I think you sort of see a little bit of a bump in optimism around this time of year, after the draft. Sort of the draft is obviously kind of like Christmas, where you get some free new players every year, and you see some optimism, especially this year with a guy like Devontae Smith that they drafted. People start talking themselves into, oh, well, they can win 8 or 9 games, maybe 10 games this year. I'm not seeing that. Like, this was the easiest year I've ever had to write about, the series for the Eagles. This is the easiest year that I've ever done this for the Eagles specifically. And they were also the easiest one to come up with. I could have gone to 15, frankly, if I wanted to. So like it was an easy one to write this year. I'm not very bullish on their season. I'd probably have them somewhere around like six wins, like 6-11, something like that.
Jimmy, you mentioned the owner in Washington. That's easy. The owner in Dallas is typically easy to get them involved. Did you think at the beginning when you started, you mentioned about 10 years to now, it's kind of easy to get the owner involved in Philadelphia now as well. How much has that changed?
Yeah, I didn't go there heavily in this one.
Yeah. Well, you kind of did it with the roster and Howie and that kind of thing.
Right, where the lack of accountability for Howie and how they took basically a Super Bowl roster and a Super Bowl team and turned it into what it is. I mean, like there's just no sugarcoating the horrible offseason moves over the last 3 years, both in terms of the draft, the free agency moves, restructures and re-signings of guys already on the roster. All 3 areas they failed over the last 3 years. So, and the guys who were in charge of that remain in charge. And you're right. Like Jeffrey Lurie has finally come over some heavy scrutiny this offseason, notably from a piece early in the offseason from Jeff McClain of the Inquirer, and then a little bit later in the offseason from Bo Wolf, Shukapadia, and Zach Berman from The Athletic. So this is sort of the first time that we're starting to look at Jeffrey Lurie as, I'd say he's more of a comp to Jerry Jones than I would Dan Snyder. You don't want to be sort of mentioned in the same breath as Dan Snyder these days or ever. Just in terms of, I guess, his involvement in roster moves and the draft and whatever else it may be. But yeah, he's become a target this offseason for some of the shortcomings of this team, and rightfully so.
You had a theory in one of your numbers that you pointed out, a 7th or 8th, 8th or 9th, about the Eagles' schedule this season. And I think all 3 of us can agree that it's harder early and easier late. Mainly that's because they've got a bunch of division games late, and it's once again not going to be a very tough division. If the Eagles had say in this, which they surely don't, the NFL lays out the schedule the way they lay out the schedule, and it's kind of you're at the luck and the whim of the NFL schedule makers. Do you think it's better that the Eagles are facing the tougher half of their schedule first and the easier second, or would it have been better if it was the flip side and the opposite? Started out easier early and then got tougher late. Did the NFL do them a favor, or did they actually screw them?
So I think generally speaking, you prefer to get your easier opponents early because you don't know what's going to happen with, some of the better teams in the NFL. Like their seasons can spiral out of control and go badly later in the season. Like, for example, let's say you have the Packers on your schedule, and maybe that's not a great example. Let's say you have the Chiefs on your schedule, and Patrick Mahomes and a couple other guys on their team go down during the season. You want to get them later in the season than you do want to get them early in the season when they're at full strength and they're going to beat you because they have so many good players, right? So I think just generally speaking, you'd rather get the bad teams early because those teams are likely to remain bad throughout the season. But they're definitely going to be, if they're going to be bad, they're going to be bad in the beginning of the season. Whereas good teams theoretically can become bad during the season because of injury or whatever it may be. So the Eagles schedule, the way it worked out was, if you look at like the win-loss records from their opponents during the 2020 season, it's the easiest schedule in the NFL. But as I noted in that piece, 3 of their first 6 games are against the 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Buccaneers, who are the 3 teams that were representing the Super Bowl the last 2 years. Of course, the Niners had a bad season in 2020, but everyone kind of expects them to bounce back. And then the other 3 road games, I guess, would be Atlanta. Who else am I missing there? But they're road games. And
they've got at Tampa, they've got early.
Tampa's at home. The 3
Tampa's
Super Bowl
here.
teams
Tampa's
are
here.
They're all at home.
Kansas City here, Tampa's here. All the good teams come here, so that's a positive for the most part.
Yeah, so that's tough. off the bat, they're only actually favored. Like, I guess all the point spreads came out for the entirety of the season by Westgate Sportsbook. They're only favored in 2 games. Like, they're not even favored against the Jets. That's a road game, but that's like a pick 'em later. And so there's 2 games that they're favored in, and only one where there's a pick 'em. So, I mean, they're not really, obviously, they're not thought of as a contender or anything close by outsiders or Vegas or odds makers or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I do think that first 6 games. One of the games is at Dallas. I know that it's one of the rare division games that they have early in the season. So they have a lot of tough games during that first 6 games. And if the season gets off to a bad start, sort of as many of us, I'm sure, are expecting them to, if they get, like, let's say they start 1-5, for example, like it's not easy to play in Philadelphia. Like, once it starts to, go badly, it tends to spiral. So that was sort of the point that I was making within that piece.
All right, I want to do a 180 with you, Jimmy, because you said it's tough. You left stuff on the cutting room floor for a dumpster fire with the Eagles to get down to 10.
Yes.
If you had to do a positive column and saying this is the 10 reasons this team's going to be better, a lot better than people think, did you even get to 10?
Yeah, they'd all be projection. Like, it would be just a lot of, like, if this goes right and if that goes right. Like, for example, like the offensive line. If Lane Johnson's ankle stops bothering him this season after it's been a problem for him for the last 3 seasons, and if Brandon Brooks can return to his play after, suffering 3 major injuries in a span of 18 months, and if Jason Kelsey's still playing at a high level at his age, and if Isaac Seumalo is fine, and if Jordan Mailata or Andre Dillard become like a good left tackle this season, then they can become, then their offensive line is a good starting point as an offense. If Jalen Hurts can take his game to the next level, if his accuracy can improve substantially, if the second cornerback opposite Darius Slay isn't a total disaster, if their linebacker acquisition of Eric Wilson and can play well, and Alex Singleton can keep his level of play up, if their defensive line can be the strength of if that would be sort of the way that I would look at things that can go right.
A lot of ifs.
Exactly.
Like the optimistic if. All right, I'll go there with a specific player using your dynamic of either if and it's great or it's a dumpster fire. If I tell you Derek Barnett is going to be one of those 2 this year, we've been waiting now. It's like 3 years running. This is the breakout year for Derek Barnett, at least in my estimation. Hasn't happened yet. If I tell you it's either happening this year and damn, they're going to have to pay this kid because he had a breakout season, or pretty much a dumpster fire. And you got to admit, it was a overdrafted player with a first-round pick. Which one is more likely?
He's an interesting player because an interesting player in terms of their off season this year, in that before they got to sort of the first day of the new league year, he had a big number coming up because the Eagles exercised his 5th-year option. So he was going to play on the 2021 season at over 10 million. I forget the exact number, but I figured like they were going to do one of 2 things with him: extend him and get his 2021 number down significantly, or just release him. Just to not have him on their books at over 10 million. As it turned out, they kept him at that over $10 million number, and he's going to play on that cap number in 2021. So yeah, I mean, he's been good. Maybe that's the wrong word, but kind of like he's been like a respectable starter at times during his 4-year career here in Philadelphia, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy and he hasn't been consistent. So he's a guy, like you mentioned, he was probably a little overdrafted, 14th overall, I believe he was during the 2017 season. Obviously made some big plays during the playoffs his rookie year, strip sack in the NFC Championship game against the Vikings, recovered the fumble, of course, in the Super Bowl at the end of that game. So, I mean, he got off to a nice start, but you look at his career stats over the 4 years and they fall short of what I think reasonable expectations should be for a 14th overall pick. So, yeah, I would say that he's got the ability. His ceiling is a little capped because he doesn't have that, appealing athletic, the athletic traits just aren't the same that they are like with a guy like Josh Sweat, for example. So I think expecting anything elite or big numbers out of him is probably unreasonable, but can he be like an 8, 9, maybe get to 10 sack guy? I I think that's probably like where you'd cap it. I don't think he's going to be a guy that breaks the bank in the offseason next year.
Jimmy, you mentioned the odds. The Eagles are barely favored in any games. The over-under most places 6.5 wins, depending where you can get it. We've had a lot of national guys on this show. No national person, none, thinks much of this team. And most of them have admitted it comes down to the coach and the quarterback. They're not looking at much else. Yeah. We talked a little about Jalen Hurts, but I want to talk about Nick Sirianni. Are you as amazed as me? I look over, I know this is one of your bullet points. You talked about the youth of the coaching staff. That's not my problem. My problem is where's the Jim Schwartz for Doug Peterson? Where's the Wade Phillips for Sean McVay? Where's the Vic Fangio for Matt Nagy? I still can't figure out how they cobbled this coaching staff together.
It's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that angle, but you're right. Like the defensive coordinator is a first-time defensive coordinator. The special teams coordinator is a first-time special teams coordinator. The quarterback coach is a first-time NFL quarterback coach. Like the most senior coach on that staff, of course, is Jeff Stoutland. What is he? 54 years old, I think. So I mean, he's your run game coordinator. He's going to help, marginally. He's going to help the head coach in some areas, I guess. But you're right. Like they don't have sort of that seasoned, assistant coach to get Nick Sirianni through. And there's so much that goes into the head coaching job beyond just calling plays or leading the locker room. There's just so much minutia that goes into being a head coach. It's crazy. Like it kind of blew Doug Peterson away that he didn't know he was sort of getting into that first year in 2016. So yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. It's one that I hadn't thought of, but I think you're dead on with that. And the point that I made in the piece that I think kind of goes along with what you're saying is, Jeffrey Lurie basically admitted, he said, it's projection in terms of what he'll be as a head coach in the NFL. And he even said the words, some of the effect of the coach that, we hope he can be, as opposed to the coach that he is, so in the same way that you draft, a prospect in on day 2 or day 3 that you think has upside and is a project, it's sort of like what they did when they hired this head coach. So it can go very badly if he isn't ready for this opportunity. I do think that the enthusiasm is real and the excitement for him is real, and I do think that the players, may respond to the positivity and that energy that he brings to the table. But ultimately, that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be competent. And I'm not saying he won't be. But you're right. Like he doesn't have that support system behind him either. Should he need it at some point? Should he need to lean on somebody at some point?
All right, Jimmy, since John went to the coach, I'll go to the QB. And you've been doing this a long time. John's been doing it a long time. I've been following the league a long time. I cannot remember a situation like we have here in Philadelphia where you have a quarterback who is so, at least in their own little sphere here in Philadelphia, universally believed in when it comes to leadership, take control, guys want to play with him. Everybody sings his kids' praises about how it has already become his team and he's the man and he's in charge, and that won't be an issue. But we just don't know about him skill-wise. Can he be accurate enough? Can he do what needs be out of the pocket, make plays on the run? We know he can run. I think he showcased that in the 3+ games that he played for the Eagles last year. But his passing game is yet to be determined. It's almost always the other way around, that what the skill set is. He's a high drafted quarterback. He's got arm strength. He's very good at this. He's very good. But is he going to be able to take the lead? A second-year player who's taking over as the starting quarterback is rare to begin with, and how he's going to be able to lead and do those type things is almost always what the questions are. It's the exact opposite of Jalen Hurts. Is that a good thing or bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the positives, of course, with the intangibles and the leadership and the smarts and all that. He's got all that. And I think that whatever ability he has, he'll get the most out of that. And you mentioned the arm strength, which is fine. Like, I don't think it's a positive or a negative, but it's fine. Like, it's adequate NFL arm strength. The problem is the accuracy, and he threw for 52% accuracy last year, which, of course, on paper looks bad. Not necessarily the end-all, be-all of accuracy, although when it's that low, it's a pretty good indicator that he's not accurate. But I took a look at all of his throws during the 2020 season, and yeah, I mean, he left a lot of very makeable throws on the field. In fact, Chris Sims of NBC Sports recently just put out his top 40 quarterback list. Jalen Hurts didn't even make it. So he didn't even make the top 40. I think that's ridiculous, first of all, that they have him. You know, Case Keenum is on. I didn't even know who Case Keenum played for. Like, I had to Google him to see who.
I said the same thing last week. I said the same exact thing on Friday.
I don't know. Apparently, he plays for the Browns, so he's the Browns. He's Baker Mayfield's backup. So, I mean, that's ridiculous. He should at least be on that list. But the point that he made, I think he said in a podcast somewhere, was that, you know, there were throws that he left on the table that a good high school quarterback would make, and that's an assessment that I think is fair. Like, I think he did miss some very, very makeable throws in his rookie season, and you know, it's a small sample size. So he played 4 games at the end of the year. Very tough situation. The scheme stunk. The quarterback, the starting quarterback had a dreadful season, got benched. Wide receivers weren't great. Offensive line had been absolutely decimated by the time he had played. So there are plenty of excuses that you can make for Jalen Hurts and his inaccuracy last season, but it's got to improve substantially. The bottom line is, like, he has to be a lot more accurate going forward in 2021 and beyond than he was in his rookie season. And if he can't, he's not going to be a legitimate NFL quarterback, a starting quarterback anyway. If he can, then there's reason to believe he can too, by the way. Like, he was very inaccurate early in his college career, and he worked at it, and his accuracy improved as his college career went along. Now, can he do that in the pros? I'm sure that's a different story. Like, that's a whole different ball game in terms of being able to improve your accuracy at this level than it is in college. So I don't know. We'll see. But if he can improve his accuracy, he does have all those other traits that you mentioned, the intangible, and of course the running ability. Like, in my opinion, he is the second best running quarterback in the NFL behind only Lamar Jackson. Like, I think he's that good as a runner. So he has that going for him as sort of a base skill. And, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily like a foregone conclusion that he's going to fail as the Eagles quarterback. I think he's got a chance, but I also think that accuracy issue is going to be a very difficult one to overcome. And it doesn't just have to get better. It has to get way better than it was as rookie.
All right, Jimmy, to kind of further that with Jalen Hurts, last one from me, and this is nitpicking. I'll say that from the start. But the way they've cobbled together this quarterback depth chart, when you have a young quarterback, and there's so many questions, your third string quarterback, should it be a Nick Mullins who can play a little bit if he's forced into it, or should it be another developmental guy? In other words, add lottery tickets. Keep trying lottery tickets. Now, we all know they have the money. They're going to have the draft capital to go in a different direction at quarterback if they want to. But is that the right philosophy, I guess I'm trying to say? Or should they just be trying to throw darts at the dartboard with young guys?
Yeah, I think they tried sort of to throw a lottery ticket in there and Jamie Newman. And I mean, you and I didn't get to watch OTAs this year like we normally would have, but he must have been awful. Like, he must have just been really bad during the first camp for him to get released, basically in May. So was it May? Yeah, I think so. Whatever, May, June, whatever it was. And then, of course, as you mentioned, they signed Nick Mullins, which, whatever, I think it's fine. Like, I actually think he can maybe compete for the number 2 spot against Joe Flacco. We'll see. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I'm with you. Like, if they had drafted a quarterback on day 3, I don't remember exactly how strong the quarterbacks were on day 3 in this particular draft. There's a nice little cluster there, like the Kellen Monds and the guy from Stanford wise name is escaping me, and somebody else went. Yes, and there's a third guy that got drafted right in that cluster, late in round 2 or early round 3 or whatever it was.
Kyle Trask was.
That's it. Kyle Trask from Florida, of course, has some. Of course, his quarterback coach was Brian Johnson at Florida. So anyway, I mean, they could have gone that route. I think people would have been furious if they took a quarterback again that high. I think they were right, maybe not to take one on day 2. But as far as the quarterbacks, the backup quarterbacks, Flacco was brought in. A lot of people thought that, maybe he was brought in to be a mentor. Flacco spoke to the media and sort of said, no, I'm here to compete for the starting job. Like, he didn't sound like he was super into being that mentor. I don't know what Nick Mullins' history as a mentor is, no idea. But yeah, like in the same vein that you mentioned, that Nick Sirianni doesn't necessarily have another coach with head coaching experience to lean on. Maybe the same can be said of Jalen Hurts, that he may not have like a great mentor to lean on in that room, but also, as you mentioned, they don't have a second quarterback that has maybe that ceiling that they develop over time to either become a starter or a quality backup.
All right, Jimmy, need you to look into your football crystal ball. Some 29 days down the road, when Eagle Camp opens, is the number one story. And Zach Ertz is still on the roster, and he's not here, or Zach Ertz is on the roster, and he's here. Surprisingly, shockingly, he's here, because a whole bunch of us Eagle writers had him out of town months ago.
Yeah.
29 days down the road, will it at least be decided that Zach Ertz is elsewhere, either because he traded and or released, or is the drama going to continue to the first day of camp?
I don't know how much they care about distractions becoming a thing during training camp, but if they don't trade him by the start of training camp, and I don't think he's showing up to training camp if they don't trade him, that becomes the biggest story of camp immediately, when it really shouldn't be. There's no reason for that to be a story this year. So ultimately, I do think they'll deal him before the start of camp. I would lean more toward that end than him remaining on the roster. But at the same time, Howie Roseman seems to be not budging on whatever he believes Zach Ertz's value is, or whatever he believes the Eagles should be getting in return for Zach Ertz. He hasn't seen it yet. So the longer he stubbornly holds on to that, the longer he'll remain on the team. And like, it's possible that he goes into training camp as, still on the roster, but I think that would be the wrong tact to take here if I were Howie Roseman and the Eagles.
It's only 29 days before you guys get quality grass time and camp gets underway. So always a pleasure, JK. Thanks for hopping on. Love the Dumpster Fire series. Outstanding job by you. Appreciate you sharing a couple more insights with us here on Birds 365. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Jim Kempski from phillyboys.com. If you haven't read his Dumpster Fire, if you don't even know what the hell we're talking about, I basically say, shame on you, Eagle fans. How do you not know about Jimmy Kempski's Dumpster Fire series? Yay takes down the Giants. Yay takes down the Cowboys. Yay takes down the Redskins. Yay takes shots at every other team in the National Football League. But then he takes shots at the Eagles, too, which is very good. He does a great job with it.
And what did we learn, Jody? Washington football team, best team in the division.
They were last year. I don't know if they're going to be this year. I'll say this about Washington, and we got to take a timeout, come back, put a bow in the show. Their defense, if you just break it down into 4 teams, 8 groupings, offense, defense, I'm leaving special teams out of it. Apologies to all you special teamers. Their defense is the best unit of the 8 units in the division. If you're talking about Eagle offense, Cowboy offense, Giant offense, Redskin offense, Redskin defense, Cowboy defense, Giant defense, Eagle defense, the Redskins defense is the best of those 8 units.
Let's put the Cowboys offense close. In theory, the healthy Dak Prescott, all those receivers, offensive lines back, Teron Smith, Zach Martin, Lyle Collins. Who knows about Ezekiel Elliott?
I need to see Dak. By 2 weeks into the season, we'll be here week 2 of the season. Yeah. If the Cowboys put up 30 points both of the first 2 weeks, I'm going to go, yeah, McMullen was right. Remember during the summer when he said, watch out for the Cowboy offense, they're as good as the Redskin defense. I readily admit you could be very right. I need to see Dak. I need to see him come back. I know that he's capable of playing. If he is, you're right. It's a very good point. But we don't know that yet. We got to actually see him do it on the field. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, we are the Birds 365 Mac guys. We'll come back in just a sec.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.